For today's class, you're going to need a pair of matching yoga blocks, a pair of tennis balls, a belt, and a nice clear area with some padding. And we are going to start in child's pose. So have your toys nearby, ready to go. And join me in child's pose. For child's pose, I do recommend padding underneath your knees. Now let your knees go wide, but bring your big toes together. So toes are together, knees are apart, and you back your hips up towards your heels. I have to push into my hands to back my hips up, and as I do that, I round my back. If I were to let go and stop pushing my hips back, I would fall forward and end up kind of like a stink bug with my rear end in the air. So you want to be more like a Volkswagen Beetle with a rounded back, pressing your hips back towards your heels, letting your back round. Your head might not touch the ground, and that's fine. And then find your breath and let your breath come in and out through your nose and along the length of your spine. Find breath at your tailbone. Find space in your low back. Find breath in your back ribs. And in between your shoulder blades. And with your head hanging heavy, feel space, the back of your neck, base of your skull. And with an internal awareness, let your third eye, your inner eye, open. See, feel yourself from the inside out. Observe your spine. And as you shift forward, come up to hands and knees. Curl your toes under, maybe bring your knees a little closer together. Continue to round your back, arching your back like a hollowing cat. Pull your belly button in against your spine, tuck your tail, tuck your chin. And keep breathing. Begin to move with your breath in the following way. As you exhale, back your hips up towards your heels. Again, you still have your toes curled under, so you'll get a toe stretch. And as you inhale, shift forward towards your head. Exhale, backing up, pulling your belly to your spine, tucking your tail, tucking your chin, arching your back the entire time like a hollowing cat. Inhaling, shifting forward. So it's a pulsing, a movement forward and backward. Exhaling, pressing back. Inhaling, shifting forward, but keeping your back arched the entire time. Chin tucked, tail tucked. So you'll feel your toes getting a bit of a stretch. And hopefully you're feeling your back get a bit of a stretch. And then shifting forward. Inhale, head up, tail up, come into that sway back to cow variation. Still with your toes curled under in that sway back to cow variation. Exhale, press back. Inhale, shift forward. And just notice how this feels in your body. Inhaling, shifting forward. Exhaling, shifting back, keeping your toes curled under so you get that toe stretch. And then shifting forward one more time. Pull your front ribs, pull your belly up into your body, but keep those sit bones spread. You're gonna lift your knees up and hover. I'm gonna move my pillow out of the way so you can see my hovering knees. Hover your knees 1 inch off the ground, keeping that neutral spine. So your front ribs and belly are pulled up, your butt is still relaxed. and you have a neutral spine. And then set your knees down, still with your toes curled under. Inhale, head up, tail up into your sway back cow. Exhale, arching your back for cat pose. And now with your front ribs and belly pulled up into your body, your chin tucked and your tail tucked, can you keep your butt relaxed with that tail tucked and lift your knees up? Knees are up 1 inch or so. Back is arched in that cat pose. And then knees come down. Inhale into cow. Exhale into cat. Pull in those front ribs, pull in your belly, a little forceful exhalation to pull that belly button in tighter. Maybe pull up on that pelvic floor. And once again, hover those knees off the ground. And then squeeze your knees closed. And can you get a little bit more lift in your midsection? Knees stay 1 inch off the ground, but squeezing your knees closed, maybe you can get a little bit more lift in those front ribs. And then set it down. Inhale, head up, tail up into your sway back cow. And once again, with a stronger, more forceful exhalation, press out all your breath. Squeeze your thighs close, pull in your front ribs, pull in that pelvic floor, lift those knees up 1 inch. Feeling even stronger now. And knees go down. Final time, inhale, head up, tail up into that sway back cow. Exhale, pull in that pelvic floor, squeeze your thighs closed, hover your knees 1 inch off the ground. And then set your knees down, inhale, head up, tail up, sway back cow. Still with those toes curled under, walk your hips back towards your heels and climb your hands up your lap. I need to roll out my wrists. So take a moment to roll your wrists, fan your fingers. Still with those toes curled under. Big loopy circles. And reverse, big loopy circles. And with those fingers spread wide, tenting your fingers, coming up onto fingertips. Last blast here. Full activation. Big inhale, prepare. And as you exhale, all the breath out, pull in that pelvic floor, squeeze your knees closed, get your knees 1 inch off the ground. Hover. And then knees come on down. You get to untuck your toes and back it up into that child's pose. Big toes together, knees apart. Hips back over your heels. That was all about activating your abs and hopefully getting your lower back to release. But just in case that lower back hasn't cooperated with you yet, I'm going to take your belt. And you're going to, like me, bow forward and tie your thighs together. So I'm taking this belt, tucking it in behind my legs, and then buckling that belt or just tying it up into a knot to hold your legs closed. And it is a belt, not a tourniquet. You're not cutting off circulation, but you are securely fastening yourself, seat belting yourself in. So I've got this down here above my knees, big toes together. I'm having that belt keep my knees from going wider than hip width. So there is a little thigh gap here. My knees are hip bone width. So here's my hip bone. My knee bones are hip bone width apart. And there is a bit of a thigh gap. I can put my hand in there. But my knees are not going any wider than my hips. Belted nice and tight. Big toes together. Exhaling, rounding back, pulling in that front rib, pulling in the belly, tucking the tail, then backing hips up, pressing into my hands to back my hips up. All the same stuff we've been doing all along, adding on. So that front rib and belly pulled in, the pelvic floor is pulled in, the legs are being held closed by the belt. And so now you get to work to push your thighs wider. Because they're belted together, they're not actually going to go anywhere. But think about pushing your thigh bones apart from one another, especially the upper thigh bones, pushing the upper thigh bones wide. And of course, they're not going anywhere because you're belted. And as you do this, your front ribs and belly are pulled in. That pelvic floor is pulled in. You're pressing into your hands to round your back, stapling your hips to your heels, and you are spreading those thighs. And they go nowhere, but you definitely feel something happening in that lower back. And maybe your hips are coming down lower onto your heels than usual. And this is not about putting your face on the floor. So keep working it. Keep pressing those thigh bones wide, pulling up on that pelvic floor. And release the belt, release the pose, let it go. I have found that that's little belt trick is the only way I've ever been able to get my hips onto my heels in that child's pose. And now, without the belt, you get to come into that child's pose again, the third or fourth time so far this morning, and just notice the difference already. All right, let's keep playing with it. So we're going to come on up to hands and knees. Again, padding underneath your knees encouraged. Toes curled under for the added toe stretch. Inhale, head up, tail up. And exhale, press your breath out, pull your belly in, arch your back for cat pose. And maintaining this cat pose, shift your ribs to one side. And then shift your ribs to the other side. So we did front to back action. Now we're doing side to side. And as you do this, keep those front ribs, keep that belly, that pelvic floor pulled up into your body. And again, I do recommend padding underneath your knees so you don't grind your knees against the concrete. And you might take your hands a little wider apart so you can shift your weight side to side a little wider. That pelvic floor, that belly pulled up into your body. Back arched the entire time. Shifting your weight side to side. Notice what's going on in your lower back, outer hips, side ribs. And you might find you go a little further to each side each time you repeat this. Again, I do recommend hands wide, fingers turned out to the sides. And then coming to neutral. Stretch your right leg straight back behind you. Still with the toes curled under, so you get that toe stretch. Still with your front ribs and belly pulled in, pelvic floor pulled up, hands straight underneath the shoulders. And to test whether or not you do have those abs engaged, think about hovering, floating the bent knee off the mat. No weight in that bent knee. So your front ribs and belly are pulled up into your body. You can set that left knee back down, but try keeping as much weight off that knee as you possibly can. The midsection is engaged. Right leg stretched straight back behind you, and then take that right leg, sweep it across midline. Keep your front ribs and belly lifted as you dump the pocket change out of that right hip pocket. And you might find yourself kind of pivoting, swinging that heel, outer right heel down, the pinky toe blade edge of that right foot down. And reset and switch sides. Left toes curl under, left leg stretches straight back, feeling that calf muscle stretch, pulling up your front ribs, pulling up your belly. If you're feeling strong, you might come up onto fingertips. Make sure you're not collapsing into those wrists. And check yourself, make sure that midsection is engaged, that bent knee is carrying very little weight, if any at all. So you're basically trying to hover off the ground, lifting away from the ground as much as you can. And then taking that left leg, crossing midline with it, and maybe pivoting to the pinky toe side of the foot. Dumping pocket change out of that left hip pocket, but keeping that midsection lifted. and reset. Coming back to neutral, once again, arching your back into that cat pose, pulling up on that pelvic floor. Right leg stretches back, pressing through the heel. Right leg crosses midline. Still pulling your front ribs up into your body, lifting weight out of the heels of your hands, and then tucking that right knee in behind the left. So that right knee is tucked in behind the left, and hands go wide as you swing your hips side to side. Swinging your hips side to side. The front ribs and belly are still pulled up into your body. And you're getting a nice lower back stretch and outer hip stretch too. If you're feeling good about this, your feet are apart. Hopefully you have your blocks nearby. Start tucking those blocks between your heels. I'm stacking my blocks like a layered cake. I've got 2 blocks back there, and I'm going to attempt to sit back on top of those blocks between my heels. That's what the side view looks like. Notice I am not sitting on that heel. On the front, it looks like this. My legs are crossed, one on top of the other. And I do have this padding. You can tuck something in between the knees if there's a big gap between your knees, or if your knees are floating off the ground, fill the gaps with props so that you feel supported. And I'm sitting on 2 blocks, and I've reached back to make sure that those sit bones are making contact. I'm going to switch my legs real quick because I want to mirror image you, and I'm actually going to move a little closer to the screen. You're probably correct if you are sitting with your right leg on the bottom. If you have your left thigh on top, then we will be doing the same thing, going the same way. So right leg on the bottom. So the right leg on the bottom is really well anchored. It's not going to go anywhere. So shoulders up, back and down. Inhale, take both arms up and overhead. Hook your thumbs together and lift your ribs out of your hips. Wiggle and stretch. Keep these front ribs pulled in a little bit so that your spine stretches straight up. Try not to arch your back too much. So there is a little contraction here at the front ribs. And you're pulling your ribs out of your hips, getting long through your torso. And then release your left hand down. Stretch up through the right side and tip on over. Eventually, this bottom hand finds the ground and you press into it a little bit to flare those right side ribs out. So hopefully, if you're on the correct side here, you've got the right thigh on the bottom and this right arm is stretching. You're getting a good lengthening through the right side of your body. You're not falling over. Inhale, come all the way up. Give yourself a pat on the back. Reach over, plug that arm into socket, push it in, pull it across. Put your head on straight, but tuck in your front ribs. Staying neutral and upright. And keep breathing. And go ahead, release. This right arm now comes diagonal across. Can you turn to look over your left shoulder? Shoulders down, chest lifted. Deep breaths. Look forward. Take that back arm, snake it underneath. I'm crawling down the leg as low as I can go, getting my arms across as tightly as I can, and then take that bottom arm, flip it up, wrap the top arm around it. Shoulders down away from your ears, elbows pressing forward, pulling in your front ribs. Even here, doing a little bit of a cat pose, pulling in your front ribs, leaning into that space between your shoulder blades. And breathing. All right, we've been here a while, so go ahead, release, and you're going to tip forward, uncross your legs, and we're going to do the whole thing on the other side. So uncross your legs. Let's take a moment to come up into a downward facing dog. Get the circulation to restore the circulation in your legs. Take them for a walk, pedaling your feet, jogging your hips side to side. And as you take that happy dog for a walk, again, do keep all your toys nearby. You're definitely going to want some padding underneath your knees in a moment. As you come on down to hands and knees, again, I recommend having that padding underneath your knees. Arch your back for cat pose, toes curled under. Left leg stretches straight back. Still pulling your front ribs into your body, pulling that pelvic floor into your body, making sure you're taking weight out of that knee. Your right knee is down, but it's not heavy. Left leg crosses midline. You can pull in on that pelvic floor a little bit tighter, and then tuck that left knee in behind the right. So you end up with your legs crossed, feet apart, hands go wide, and you're going to swing your hips side to side. And I'm going to go sideways. Swinging your hips side to side. Front ribs and belly pulled up into your body the entire time. Hands go wide, fingers turn out to the sides so you can control this. And there's my yoga chicken. All right, still with your legs crossed. Still with your legs crossed, reach back, take your blocks, tuck those blocks between your heels, and then sit back on the blocks between your heels. And if we're on the same side together, we have the left leg on the bottom. And you are sitting between your heels, sitting on a couple of blocks. Shoulders up, back and down, palms turned forward. Inhale, taking your arms up and overhead, hooking your thumbs together and lifting your ribs out of your hips, getting nice and long. Maybe shifting your weight a little side to side. Keep your front ribs pulled into your body. Stretching up nice and long and tall. Again, if you have this cross the same way I do, this left leg is well anchored. Right hand can come down to your side, reaching up to the left, and then tipping over, coming into that side stretch. Bottom hand on the ground so you can push out the left side ribs. And breathe. Come on back up. Give yourself a pat on the back, bend that top elbow. Reach up and over, plug that top arm into socket, pull it behind your head a little further. Sit up tall. Front ribs, belly pull in. Even here, doing a bit of a cat pose with your back. And breathe. Release, raise that left hand in the air, take it diagonal across as you twist. And looking forward, you're going to take that back arm, snake it through. I lean forward a little bit as I do this. I crawl that hand down as far as I can get it to go, really crossing my arms tight. And then that bottom arm flips up, top arm wraps around. Elbows press forward, waistline pulls back, heads on level and straight. And from here, go ahead, unwind, release, tip forward, bail out, come into your downward facing dog. Clear the deck. It's just you and a yoga mat, downward facing dog. Taking that dog for a jog, letting your hips sway side to side, pedaling your feet, bending one knee then the other. Prancing and dancing, swinging and swaying. Eventually coming to neutral in your downward facing dog. And rise up onto tippy toes. Begin to pull in your front ribs, shift your body weight forward, squeeze your thighs closed, engage your midsection as you shift all the way forward to the top of a push-up and continue to shift forward all the way to the tippy toes. So up on tippy toes, shifting your chest as far forward as it's willing to go. And then your knees bend down to the mat and your toes untuck and you back up into child's pose. And as you do this, hopefully you maintained that cat back the entire time. So let's repeat, make sure we're paying attention to the shape of our backs. Coming to hands and knees, toes curled under. Exhale for that cat pose, bottoms up and back into a downward facing dog. In downward facing dog, there's a tendency to let your chest sag, to let those front ribs poke out. We're going to pay attention to those front ribs. And as you exhale, pull in those front ribs, squeeze your thighs closed, rise up onto your tippy toes. Keep pulling that pelvic floor, those front ribs up into your body as you shift forward to the top of your push-up and keep shifting forward to the tips of your toes. Keep those front ribs pulled in as you bend your knees down to the ground, untuck your toes. Still front ribs are pulled up into your body as you back up to child's pose. One more time. Coming to hands and knees, toes curled under. Exhale to cat pose. Lift your knees up to hover. Back your hips up into downward facing dog. From downward facing dog, rise to tippy toes as you exhale. Pull in those front ribs, pull up that pelvic floor, shift forward, shift forward, shift forward, shift forward. Bend your knees down. Toes untuck and press your hips back, 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 back. Inhale to hands and knees, toes curled under. Exhale, cat pose. Lift your knees up, downward facing dog. Downward facing dog, rise to tippy toes. Exhale, pull in those front ribs, shift your body forward, 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 and then drive that right knee forward, forward, forward. Still off the ground. And then back into downward facing dog. And rise up onto tippy toes. Exhale, pull in your front ribs, pull in your belly, shift your body forward, drive that left knee forward, 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 off the ground. And back into downward facing dog. Rise to tippy toes. Exhale, shift your body forward, drive that right knee forward. And back into downward facing dog. Exhale, shift forward, pull in those front ribs, drive the left knee forward. And back into downward facing dog. Rise to tippy toes, shift your body weight forward. Exhale, pull in those front ribs. Bend your knees all the way down to the ground. And back your hips up, child's pose. All right, find your blocks. We're going to come into a lunge. You're going to need all the toys. You're going to need your blocks. You're going to need your pillow. and 1 tennis ball. And I'm going to pick the red one because that's showing up. Oh, I'm going to put the blue one on the pink mat because that shows up. There we go. Contrast. Okay, so I'm going to take my right foot forward. I encourage you to be on the same side as me. So taking that right foot forward, foot can go on top of that tennis ball. Left knee's on some padding, hands on blocks, come into a nice lunge. That's what the side view looks like. Notice I'm using up the full length of my yoga mat. So have a long stride between your feet. Take up that yoga mat. That's what the profile view looks like. Notice I've got my hands on blocks straight down underneath my shoulders. And my front toe sticking out further than any other point on my body. That's what the profile view looks like. Let me show you face on. Again, you've got that right foot forward. And you are in a lunge and you've got blocks. Even if you have super long arms and short legs, I do recommend having the blocks because you get to wiggle around a little bit and you want to have control. So foot is on tennis ball and go ahead, give that foot a waggle. Roll that foot around. Give yourself a little foot rub here. This is just my sneaky way of having you hang out in this lunge a little longer than usual. And shift and wiggle around. So you'll see I'm kind of coming in and out of the lunge. So feel free to move all over the place on this one. To control this, you're still engaging those front rib muscles. You're still pulling up on that pelvic floor. You're still doing your cat pose. And the stronger your cat muscles, your front ribs, that pelvic floor are, the more control you'll have over this. And then you get to switch sides. Again, I do highly recommend padding underneath the weighted knee. Blocks beneath your hands, ball underneath your foot. So now that left foot is forward. And you might come in and out of the lunge, shift forward and backward, side to side. Get a good foot rub going on. And then set the balls aside. Switch sides again. Right foot forward. Hands on blocks. I'm turning my blocks up to the high level. Back toes curled under and lift that back knee up. So the back knee is up. Front knee is still bent. You can see here, the front knee is still bent. Up on the tippy toes of the back foot, hop that back foot a little bit wider. Maybe wiggle the front foot a little bit wider. So now you can see I've got opposite diagonal corners of the mat. Opposite diagonal corners. So there's length and width between my feet. Up on tippy toes. And then using those blocks beneath your hands, you get to swing your hips. Straighten and unstraighten the front leg. Swing your hips side to side. Twist your torso. As you do this, front ribs and belly are pulled up. Pelvic floor is pulled up. You're doing your best cat pose, rounding your back. And you're using enough blocks underneath your hands so that both hands are solidly making contact with something. Notice my back heel is lifted and it is unstuck. I'm letting that back heel swing side to side. I'm pivoting on the ball of my foot. So I'm kind of pivoting on the ball of the back foot and kind of pivoting on the heel of the front foot. Wiggling. And then bending the knees, both knees, stepping forward, stepping back, switching sides, going long. Long with width. Long and wide. And playing around with it. Front ribs and belly pulled up, lower back is supported as you pivot and wiggle. Toes are spread. And from here, I am just going to rotate into a wide-legged forward fold. And you can orient yourself however you like, but I recommend orienting yourself with your feet wide so that you can face the screen. Toes turn in, heels turn out. Find yourself in a wide-legged forward fold. And melt down into that forward fold. Knees unlocked, toes turned in, heels turned out. Prostrate Padottanasana, wide-legged forward fold. Put a bend in your knees and your hands on your lap. Round your back, roll all the way up to standing. And then check to make sure you have feet nice and wide. Ankles underneath wrists. Let's turn all 10 toes to the right. All 10 toes turn to the right. Lining up heel to heel if you're new, heel to arch if you're not so new. Arms come up and overhead. Hooking your thumbs together. Lift your ribs out of your hips. Maybe tick-tock your hips side to side a couple times. Getting nice and long through the torso. Front ribs and belly are pulled in. That pelvic floor is pulled in. Now stretch up nice and long and tall. And then let that left hip kick out as you tip over into your triangle pose. The right knee is unlocked. You can have your hand on your shin, or if you have that block handy, you can have your hand on a block to the outside of the ankle. Top hand in the air, raise it like you just don't care, but do care about it. High five an imaginary friend, pull in your front ribs, pull in your belly, and twist your chest open. Triangle pose. Both knees are unlocked, all 10 toes are flared. And then with an inhale, lift on up and soften your knees. Spin your feet to go the other direction. All 10 toes to the left. Big inhale, arms up and overhead, hooking your thumbs together, tick-tocking your hips, pulling your ribs out of your waist, keeping those front ribs pulled in a little bit, that pelvic floor lifted and engaged. Letting that left hip, right hip kick out as you tip over to the left, coming into that triangle pose. And again, hand can rest lightly on your shin, with the knee unlocked, or that block can be on the outside of your ankle. High five an imaginary friend, pull in your front ribs, pull in your belly, turn your chest open. And with an inhale, come all the way up. Pivot, let's switch sides again. All 10 toes to the right, big inhale, arms up and overhead. And tipping on over, coming back to that triangle pose. Again, a hand can be on shin or on block. Knee is unlocked. Top hand in the air, turning your chest open. And let's take that top arm, turn the armpit towards your face. Like you're looking for the pale skin that has no tan. Turn that pale armpit skin towards your face and bring it right alongside your head. For a big side stretch, you're trying to create a horizontal horizon line connecting hip, armpit, and pinky finger. Knee unlocked. There's a lot of weight coming over this right leg, so make sure that knee is unlocked. And with an inhale, come all the way up. Let's switch sides. Pivot your feet to go to the left. Big inhale, arms up and overhead, kicking out that right hip. Coming on over into that triangle pose. Knee unlocked. Armpit skin, the pale skin turned towards your face, like you're checking for deodorant. Find that horizontal horizon line. Big stretch. And with an inhale, come all the way up. And let's switch. This time, pivot all 10 toes to the right once again, but then take that right foot and jog it back like a footprint. And the muscles you use to pull that leg back, a footprint, the inner thighs, the pelvic floor, you want to keep those muscles engaged. Keep pulling back and up, even after you've replaced your foot. So it's short, one footprint. Block is still there, ready for you. Arms go up and overhead. Tipping over to a short-based triangle. Finding that block. Let's put the top hand on your hip, just for balance sake. Bottom hand on a block. And as you shift your weight over onto that right foot, you're going to take the back leg, move it in. So you're drawing both legs in and up, pulling up on that pelvic floor. You're doing a Kegel that starts at your ankles. So contracting, pulling in, keep contracting, keep pulling in, lifting up that pelvic floor. As you start to float up into your half moon pose. Front ribs and belly are pulled in. You're still doing cat pose here in this half moon. So even though your legs are apart, you still have that inner thigh contraction, that pelvic floor lifting. And you're breathing. And your standing knee is unlocked. You got a lot of weight on that leg. And touchdown. Inhale, come all the way up. Crowd goes wild. Yay. Let's switch sides. So starting off for that triangle base, wide stride between your feet. And tip over and find that block in the left hand. And as you take this front foot, drag it back a footprint, you're engaging the inner thigh pelvic floor. And then as you take that back leg, drag it forward, you're engaging the inner thigh pelvic floor, pulling up on those Kegel muscles, even as your right leg lifts into the air. Left knee is unlocked. Raise your hand if you got this. Breathe. Toes are flared on both feet. Breathing. And softly touch down. And once again, the crowd goes wild. Good job. I'm gonna go back to that first side. Pelvic floor muscles engaged. Internal vertical lift engaged. Tipping over into that half moon pose once again. Always easier the second time around. And if you do have your front ribs pulled in and that pelvic floor pulled in, there's very little to no weight at all in the bottom hand. And gracefully touch down. Inhale up and over. Let's go to the other side. It's all about lifting up from the ground. Pulling up. Getting light. I've got 2 video crashers this morning. And come on down. So the dark one is named Toast and the light one is Marshmallow. Got Toast and Marshmallow. Yoga chickens. All right, legs go wide, forward fold. Toes in, heels out. Nice wide forward fold. To get an added shoulder stretch, knees stay on left, toes turned in, heels kicking out, sit bones wide. If you found your balance, you might be able to clasp your hands behind your back and squeeze your shoulder blades together, pressing knuckles up towards the ceiling to make a deep wrinkle of skin between your shoulder blades. Hands come to your hips, down your legs all the way to the floor, and you round your back, coming into that cat pose. Cat pose is pretty much informing everything that we do today. Maybe hop, stuff your feet a little narrower, still about as wide apart as your mat. And you're going to cop a squat. My toes are pointing out to the sides because my knees are pointing out to the sides. Toes and knees going the same direction. The further apart you take your feet, the more accessible this pose is. The closer you bring your feet, the more challenging it is for your ankles. If your ankles are really talking to you this morning, I recommend bringing your hands together, driving your hands down midline so that your elbows press against your knees, and then squeeze your knees against your elbows. And that will help take some of the pressure off your ankles. So knees are squeezing in, but elbows are pushing out, and then your ankles don't hurt so much. But if you're doing this and your knees are bothering you, please respect those knees. You might consider taking your blocks like a layered cake and putting some of your weight on those blocks, taking some of the pressure off your knees. So you can modify this malasana squat pose, taking some of the load and putting it on the blocks. Also, again, elbows still pressing against knees, knees pressing against elbows. Toes are relaxed. Weight is in the heels of your feet, if you can get it there. If this is just not working for you, then you could take those two blocks and set them side by side in butt cheek configuration. So one for each butt cheek. And you could sit on those blocks and do the butterfly pose, the Baddha Konasana. So butterfly pose, if squatting is not working for you. If you are sitting in butterfly pose because squat wasn't working for you, do make sure you are sitting on some blocks. Otherwise, you're hanging out in squat. And whatever you are doing, you're pulling in your front ribs, pulling in your belly. Breathing into your lower back. If you are in that butterfly pose, you might start crawling your hands out in front, rounding your back. You can do the same in your squat. Side view would look like this. If you are in the squat and you are not using the blocks for anything else, you might consider putting a block or two underneath your hands as you crawl your hands forward so that you are still supported. You're able to shift weight into your heels, keeping weight in your hips. Again, the modification, the Baddha Konasana would look like this. And then come on up. Everybody's going to have a seat. Everybody's taking their blocks, sitting on blocks. And everybody's taking their legs nice and wide. Oh, and I'm going to stay closer to my camera for this one. All right, legs go nice and wide. Now, if you do have those tennis balls and really flexible joints, you might consider taking those tennis balls and tucking them into your knee pits to keep your knees from hyperextending. Because those tennis balls in the knee pits are not comfortable, you're less likely to let your knees collapse onto them. But if you are putting weight on those tennis balls, it's okay because that's an acupressure point that is said to help release the backs of the legs. So you're getting good benefit either way. So if you have them, tuck them in there, keep the knees from bending backwards and hyperextending. Feet flex flat, shoulders up, back, and down. And lift your ribs out of your hips, sit up tall. Pull your ribs out of your waist. Keep these front ribs pulled in a little bit. You want to feel the back ribs pull out of your back waist. Get nice and long and tall. And then tip on over to the right side for a stretch. With your feet flexed flat, maybe one day you'll grow fingernails and toenails long enough to touch. And with an inhale, come all the way up and over to the other side. So those tennis balls really keep you focused on those knees, keep you from hyperextending them and locking them out. And inhale, come all the way up. Maybe you still feel the essence of tennis ball behind your knees when you remove them. And you can move the tennis ball a little bit lower down underneath your calf muscle. So halfway between the ankle and the knee pit. There's usually a good sore spot in there, halfway between the ankle and the knee pit, the belly of the calf muscle. There's a sore spot for almost everybody. Again, having that tennis ball in place will hopefully keep you from hyperextending and bending your knees backwards, collapsing in the legs, help you keep the legs a little bit more active. Inhale, both arms up. Stretching, reaching, getting long, and then tipping over into a side stretch. And inhale up and over to the other side. And the acupressure point that you're stimulating halfway between the knee and the ankle is said, again, to help to release the backs of the legs, calves especially, and inhale, come all the way up. All right, you're going to pull those tennis balls out. Give those legs a bit of a jiggle. Bend that left leg in. Right leg is still out to the side. Shoulders up, back, and down. Inhale, sitting tall. And as you exhale, take that left arm diagonal across because you're going to twist towards the bent, or the straight leg, twist towards the bent leg. So sitting tall, inhale, and then exhale, tipping over, reaching out over the straight leg. If your belly, like mine, didn't quite make it up and over the thigh, you can get in there with your right hand and get that belly up and over. I do it 2 or 3 times. Swipe that belly skin up, drag it over on top of the thigh, and then bow forward over the straight leg. You got all this weight coming over the straight leg. If you wanted to, you could tuck a tennis ball in there. You got a lot more weight coming over this tennis ball if you were to tuck it into the knee pit or onto the calf. So again, you do want to make sure that knee stays unlocked. And then backing on up and switching sides. So left leg goes out, right leg comes in. If you want to tuck a tennis ball in there, go ahead. It's optional. Being mindful of the knee. Inhale, sit tall. And as you exhale, you twist your torso, letting that right arm come in front, left arm behind, starting to bow forward. I take that back arm and I swipe across my belly 2, maybe 3 times. Get that belly skin up on top of my thigh as I come over that leg. Feeling that lovely hip and back stretch. Again, with a mindfulness of the knee and not collapsing that knee. And then inhale, come all the way up. All right, I've already got one leg bent in. I'm going to bend the other leg in as well. So sitting simple cross-legged, one shin in front of the other. So my legs are side by side, they're not stacked. I'm still sitting on blocks, kind of butt walk to the very front edge of those blocks. Shoulders up, back and down, sitting tall, hinging forward, trying to come forward, hinging from the hips with a flat back. So I use my hands to control my forward fold here. Trying to get your chest out and over beyond your shins. And walking your hands back, you get to switch your legs, but the other shin in front. And again, sitting tall, hinging forward. And then finally come on up. All right, from here, we're going to lie down. Again, do keep your toys nearby. Lying down with knees bent and feet flat, and perhaps you can put a pillow underneath your head. Knees bent, feet flat, feet as wide apart as your mat. Let your knees tick-tock side to side like windshield wipers. As you tick-tock side to side, notice one butt cheek lifts up, then the other. Think about squeezing the floating butt cheek to let that hip bone stick out sharp and pointy, and then drop it. Squeeze the floating butt cheek, get the hip bone to stick out sharp and pointy, and then drop it. So you are squeezing the butt cheek and then releasing. Squeezing the butt cheek and then releasing. As you tick-tock side to side. And with an awareness of your feet, because we did a fair amount on the feet today, you might simultaneously squeeze butt cheek and push the big toe mound, the ball of the foot, down into the ground to get a little bit more pelvic thrust, and then release. Squeeze butt cheek, push the ball of the foot, the big toe down, and then release. Prying open the front of the hip even more. And release. So starting to feel the front of the hips open up, we're going to take it into another variation. So knees bent, feet flat. Bring that right knee into your chest, flex your right foot, cross your ankle over your lap. So now you just have the left foot on the ground, and you're going to heel toe that left foot in towards midline. So that left foot stays flat, but you're going to roll to the pinky toe edge of the left foot, and then to the inside arch side of the left foot. You have your right ankle crossed over your lap, and your right shin bone is traveling side to side, kind of like an old-fashioned typewriter, going ting, tick, tick, ting, ching on one side, tick, 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 ching on the other. That little carriage moving side to side. And as this happens, you might notice one butt cheek lifts up, then the other, pulling out of your lower back. Good stretch going on, stretching the front of the hip. And you might find that your shins start to stack. And maybe that left foot, you can work it across midline a little bit more and start to stack your shins like fire logs. If you know fire log pose, Agni Stambhasana, kind of like a fallen, sleeping fire log pose. Maybe you can get your shins to stack, ankle over knee, knee over ankle. And then come to neutral, and you're going to reset. We'll do the whole thing again on the other side. So now that right foot is on the ground, the left ankle crosses over your lap, both feet are flexed flat. That right foot moves in towards midline, and you're going to fall inside edge, outside edge on that right foot. If you're like me, you might travel a little bit. I have to hold on to my pillow and bring it with me as I kind of slide down my mat. Pulling in that belly, pulling in that pelvic floor will give you even more stretch in the front of the hips and in your lower back. And over time, you might find that you're able to bring your shins to stack on top of one another. Both feet stay flexed. And then eventually come into that supine butterfly, bottom of the feet together, knees apart. Sleeping butterfly pose. You got your blocks nearby, you might consider taking those blocks, tucking them underneath your knees so that your butterfly wings don't break off. So put those blocks underneath your knees to keep from overstretching your inner thighs. You might take lobster claw hands to the top of your thighs, push your thigh bones away from your chest, and maybe crawl your ribs away from your hips. So pushing your thigh bones down towards your feet. Crawl out of your lower back. A big inhale. A big exhale, pull in that pelvic floor, pull in the belly. Use your hands, wrap around the backside of your legs. Use your hands to close up shop, close your legs. Big toes, knees together, heels wiggle wide apart. Toes turn in. Knees together, heels out, toes turned in. Coming into that constructive rest pose. You might reach down and spread out your backside, spread out your waistband. And just feel the weight of your thighs plug down into your pelvis and feel your lower back spread out across the ground. big belly breaths.